Good day to all of you, and let me extend special thanks to Corina Crețu, to Karl-Heinz Lambers, to Mr. Pellegrini for attending this conference, and this gives our conference, I believe, a very high political profile, and I hope it will have good consequences for the debate which we are launching today. And welcome to Bibliothèque Solvay, really one of the best venues in Brussels, but also with a lot of history, a lot of background. There is only one weak part of the place which we're using for this conference. It's hard to reach it and to find it with all the alleys in the park. But I see that most of people who are willing to attend have managed with this task. So, welcome again to the first PES Cohesion Conference. And I would like to emphasize it's first but not last. Because from my point of view, in the next months, in the even years to come, it will be one of the central political issues for our political family. And we have to take care and to mobilize politically to stand up for our understanding of progressive future for cohesion policy, which will provide benefits for the European Union and integration process. Almost 30 years ago, the cohesion policy was kick-started with an annual budget of around 10 billion euro in current prices. At that time it was 13 member countries, and it was about 30 euro per citizen when the European Union launched this very important policy. Today, with all regions in the European Union being covered, we are contributing 50 billion euro every year. So almost 100 euro per citizen to this shared pot of money. And these common resources really are important and visible to everyone across Europe in the most distant parts of our union. They improve schools, hospitals, public transportation, improve access to clean water and fresh air, provide training, skills, chances for new jobs, modernize our roads, our railways, and generally infrastructure, and support many, many other interventions that vastly improve the quality of everyday life of millions of Europeans. So, shortly, this is a policy that works. It has proven itself to be effective and to bring results. And I'm sure that everyone in this room can give numerous real-life examples of projects, infrastructural and job-creating projects, which have happened thanks to the EU cohesion policy. I would just like to give some examples. Only in the previous multi-annual financial framework, cohesion policy created 1 million jobs. It supported financially 60,000 research projects, 120,000 startups, and as many as 400,000 SMEs. And it allowed 6 million people to benefit from higher quality water. So for every euro invested in cohesion policy, the EU's GDP received in return almost free. The numbers speak for themselves. And none of this would be possible without a commitment of an upward social and economic convergence in the European Union that guided this policy through the decades. Without a steady increase in funding after successive enlargements, we would not enjoy the standards of living we have today. And perhaps we would not have had European integration at all. Because I would like to outline that especially for the new member countries, especially from Central and Eastern Europe, but also from Southern Europe, since 1980s, the cohesion policy is the most visible expression of the existence of the European Union. Institutions, Council, the Parliament, the Commission, pardon me, I mean, they look very distant. But when there is a school renovated in a municipality with European funds, everybody understands what Europe means. And this is actually the core of the issue. So, in these days, we have to mobilize politically as a family, because we have a special responsibility for the future of cohesion policy. It was initiated to a very great extent thanks to social democratic governments and representatives at the European level. And we know what is happening today, what kind of risks and challenges the future of cohesion policy faces. So it's not enough just to have good, nice conference with smart ideas. It is important to mobilize public and political and civil support across Europe to defend the cohesion policy. Because we could make this joint exercise in European solidarity even more efficient, even more sustainable, and even more beneficial for all our citizens. And we have to also answer the question how to make sure that lagging regions receive adequate support in the new European budget after 2020. And there is another third question, how to guarantee a fair distribution of funds between regions. And fourthly, how to approach the expectations that EU will be doing more and more with the same and even smaller budget at only 1% of the EU GNP. This is a reality. And I would like to address some very difficult questions which are floating in the air, but not spoken out very clearly, even by the reformers, I would say, of the cohesion policy. We need to challenge conservative forces that would rather see cohesion policy cut because it is seen as an outdated, old-fashioned policy, unjustified form of support to regions which cannot stand up on their feet on their own. And we need to face those who would see cohesion policy as another field of financial innovation, as they use the phrase, where loans and guarantees push away grants as the standard form of support to regional projects. And we know what is happening with such approaches in reality. Look at the European Investment Fund, which is a very good idea, promoted by Social Democrats, adopted by the Commission, but we know that it mainly focuses on financial instruments. And the outcome is a big disparity, regional disparity, in the absorption of the facilities which are available. And there are countries which focus a lot of big share of this fund, and some others who have nothing, effectively. And this is not the way it is supposed to be. And we also need, with the real and very serious and grave implications of Brexit, which will obviously decrease EU's budgetary revenue after 2020. So today, dear friends, we really need to start discussing progressive strategy for the future of cohesion policy. And I would like to share with you some principles and priorities that I believe should be the guiding line in our position in the upcoming negotiations for the next MFF and in the general debate about the different scenarios of the future of Europe. First and foremost, we need to counteract the tacit but widespread agreement that the EU will be devoting less money to its regional policy after 2020. Because somehow I have the sense that this can become and is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Without any really convincing reason, it has become silently accepted by many that cohesion policy will have to decrease, and there is no other way. And frankly speaking, I have a fundamental problem with this, because cohesion policy is one of the most successful investment tools in the European Union. It creates hundreds of thousands of jobs every year, and it helps to increase quality of life of people. And let me remind one more time the figures. For every euro invested in cohesion policy, EU gets back 3 euro. Don't forget this figure because it's self-speaking. Secondly, cohesion policy needs to be reformed, of course, and improved. There is no policy which is perfect. Especially in times you can see deficiencies, problems, weaknesses in every policy, and life changes. The surrounding changes. One goals are achieved, so you need to find new approaches and new instruments. But under the slogan of reforms, there is practically an idea which will reduce the efficiency of cohesion policy and will damage the coherence of the European Union in general, politically including. So we need to also find the right tools to support the least developed regions. Because let's not forget, the very idea of the cohesion policy is to upgrade, to help those who are lagging behind from economic, infrastructural, social point of view, to catch up with the rest, not to differentiate. And the reality is that after austerity was imposed on the European Union by the conservatives at large, since 2009, it led to big disparities, and Jonek presented very clearly how it is growing. And this is a big problem. So we need to realize that blind austerity kills Europe's investment capacities and is slowly destroying the very fabric, the social fabric of our societies. This is the sad but very sharp reality which we are facing. So let me get back to my earlier point. I said that the EU was built on solidarity. And the truth is that solidarity is the essence of cohesion policy. And the reality is that today, European solidarity seems to be in deep crisis. And the problem is not financial, the problem is not economic, the problem comes from the thinking, from the heads, from attitudes. This is really fundamental. And we all know that in the last years, the sharpest example of this phenomenon is the refugee crisis, how we handle this. And it is really sad to see how countries who have benefited a lot from solidarity in the European Union, including through cohesion policies, are rejecting any solidarity to other countries which are facing, in the sharpest way, the influx of refugees, people running from war, poverty, violence, etc. And this is a political problem which is really fundamental for the future of the European Union. And the saddest thing is that I don't see much of a will, not only regarding the quotas and the distribution of the refugees, but in finding a working solution based on solidarity for the future in a longer run. And I would like to be very clear as my position, because solidarity, in my view, is a two-way street. On the one hand, you benefit from solidarity of the others. On the other, you also contribute, showing solidarity to the rest of the countries. And I think that some of the countries, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, who benefited a lot from cohesion policy, should realize that the sometimes even very arrogant behavior vis-à-vis European institutions and the other countries regarding refugees is leading also to strengthening the idea of several-speed Europe, because there are political consequences from such an attitude. Today, Europe is at crossroads, and we hear every day that EU should do more for less, with less money. And others say that it should dissolve, and that national states would do better on their own. And I would like to say I fundamentally disagree with these approaches. We need together to face the challenges which Europe is facing, both economic, security, refugee, migration challenges, many others. And not just because it has to be so, because we have said in the past, from the Rome Treaty onwards, that Europe should stay together and be more and more integrated. This is common sense. In this global world, not a single country can survive and address these challenges effectively on its own. There is no other project, in my view, than the European Union which has more effective spillover effects from its existence and which has proven through the decades the ability, even in the sharpest crisis, to find ways for common solutions based on internal balances and common future. So the essence of all we're talking about is the thinking, the attitude towards each other in the European Union. If we have the understanding of a family of nations who share common values, who have common future, then we can find answers to the most difficult questions. And we as Social Democrats have always stood for European integration and for the European project. But we need to change it in its substance, because in the eyes of far too many people, Europe has simply become a tool of austerity, an instrument which punishes them, which is not anymore creating better chances for life, for jobs, for social security. Because, in brief, Europe is based on 3 pillars. The first one is that our community has economic integration, a common market. And we have always been backing it, but we have been criticized by many of our constituencies and voters for doing this, because it has become too liberal, too free market, without enough fair regulations and balances. The second pillar, thanks to the initiatives of our family, I reiterate, is cohesion policy, because it made possible to fight inequalities between member states and regions and to support many social goals that are crucial for the future of Europe. So far, it can be considered as a European success story, and we shouldn't let it down. That's our historical responsibility. And the last pillar is the battle for social Europe, and I have to be frank that we know how difficult this battle is, and we are far from achieving our goals in this regard. This year, particularly, our family really tries, with our prime ministers, our S&D group, all the representatives of the socialist family in Europe and in member states, to make this turn of EU policies towards social Europe, towards social cohesion, social rights, to become much more visible, because this is a way, the only way, I would say, to bring back hope in the European project. Otherwise, if cohesion policy would be undermined, reduced, and modified in a way which would lead to more inequalities, if we don't manage to really fight and impose a social pillar which is not just in words, but in action plan, then the European Union would be completely unbalanced. And that would be not only detrimental, I would say that would be fatal for the future of Europe. The gaps would become too many geographically, regionally, politically in our societies. We have to be aware of this. So, finally, I believe we are starting a very important process. And I would like especially to thank the Commissioner, Corina Crețu, for everything she is doing for the success of cohesion policy. I know, Corina, that the environment is tough, even in the Commission. The environment is tough in the European institutions vis-à-vis the policy you are running. And I would like you to know that you have all the backing from our family, of the PES, of the S&D group, of course of the Committee of Regions and the Socialists there, but also from our national parties. Because I think that in the next months, and this is the end and the final point I want to make, we really need to politically mobilize, to come up with a clear strategy and a project of sources of financing, modern